Rajiv Gandhi, the Indian Prime Minister who was born with a silver spoon but died with an orange. Not to mention a very big one on October 31st, 1984. The entire nation of India was mourning the loss of their beloved former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. This assassination had sent shockwaves across the country, and the responsibility now fell on her son, Rajiv Gandhi, to lead the country. Never in his wildest dreams did he think that he would become the Prime Minister. He was just a backseat politician with zero experience, and so naturally, he was reluctant to take on the role. But his mother's killer, Bean Singh, had also killed her successor, Rajiv's sister, Sanjay Gandhi. And so, there was no other choice. The Congress Party unanimously elected Rajiv as the new Prime Minister. Even though the entire party knew that he was completely unprepared for the position, Rajiv didn't even have a degree in political science. However, he was educated at the elite Doon School in India, and then at the prestigious Trinity College in England, where he earned a degree in modern history. His father, Jawaharlal Nehru, had been India's first Prime Minister, and his mother had served 2 terms as Prime Minister before her assassination. So politics wasn't exactly an unfamiliar subject to him, but nonetheless, given his lack of experience, Rajiv decided to surround himself with some of his mother's closest advisors and bureaucrats from her government. Many expected that once the immediate aftermath of Indira's death had subsided, Rajiv would step down and return to his previous role as a backseat politician. But this was far from the truth. In the 1985 parliamentary elections, Rajiv's party won a landslide victory, which gave him a massive mandate to govern over the next 4 years. He would travel all over the country, meeting people from different backgrounds and getting first-hand experience in the problems they were facing. Now, let's be clear, he didn't single-handedly solve any of these problems, but he did try. And it's these efforts that led to his untimely demise. It all started when militant activity began to increase in Punjab. This culminated into Operation Blue Star in June 1984, which was a military operation carried out by the Indian Army inside the Golden Temple to remove armed militants who had taken shelter inside. While this operation was largely successful, it also led to some unfortunate casualties, which sparked outrage among the Sikh community. The assassins of Indira Gandhi were Sikhs, and many believed that Rajiv was directly responsible for their actions. This is what eventually led to his own demise. Now, you might be thinking, what does this have to do with Sri Lanka? Well, believe it or not, it has everything to do with Sri Lanka. You see, the Tamils in Sri Lanka were also suffering at the hands of the Sri Lankan military, and they started asking India for help. In response, India deployed peacekeepers to stop the violence against the Tamils. But soon after, Rajiv made a controversial policy decision. India recognized the Tamil militant group, the Tamil as the sole representative of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka. This enraged the Sri Lankan government, who saw this as an infringement of their sovereignty. In protest, they expelled 75,000 Indian workers, most of whom were Then the Sri Lankan president, at the time, Junius Jayewardene, threatened that if India didn't reverse its decision, Sri Lanka would grant asylum to the assassins of Indira Gandhi. As you can imagine, this put Rajiv in a rather precarious position. On the one hand, he had these extremists in his own country who were calling for revenge. And on the other, he had the threat of these same extremists escaping to another country. So, what did he do? Well, he played the only card he had left. In July 1987, Rajiv signed the Indo-Lanka Peace Accord with Sri Lanka, which basically stated that India would help Sri Lanka fight the Tamil military. This included deploying the Indian peacekeeping force to stop the violence. While the accord was supposed to be beneficial for both countries, it ended up being disastrous for India. Soon after the IPKF arrived in Sri Lanka, they were attacked by the Tamil militants. This led to a full-blown war between the IPKF and the Tamil militants, which lasted for 3 years. It was during this time that the IPKF suffered heavy casualties. To make matters worse, the Sri Lankan government did keep up their end of the bargain, and the violence against the Tamil civilians continued unabated. This led to widespread criticism of Rajiv and his policies both domestically and internationally. At this point, you might be wondering, how did Rajiv's mother, Indira Gandhi, get involved in all of this? Well, Despite being prime minister, she never really liked the idea of deploying Indian troops into Sri Lanka. She felt that it would only lead to more violence and instability in the region. In fact, she had told her cabinet that she never wanted to repeat the mistakes of Vietnam. But unfortunately, she was overruled by her cabinet, and the Indian army was deployed anyway. As Rajiv's term as prime minister came to an end, his party suffered a massive defeat in the 1989 elections. In the aftermath, he stepped down and returned to his life as a backseat politician, or so everyone thought. In reality, Rajiv was plotting his comeback. You see, despite losing the election, Rajiv's party still held the majority in parliament. This meant that they could form the government with a new leader. So, Rajiv decided to throw his hat in the ring, and much to everyone's surprise, he won. He became the prime minister once again, but this time under less than ideal circumstances. The new government was plagued by scandals and controversies. There were allegations of corruption and nepotism, and many felt that Rajiv was only interested in furthering his own political career. But Rajiv was determined to prove them wrong. He started visiting different parts of the country to meet with voters and get their feedback. But this, too, was short-lived as the government was rocked by yet another scandal. This time it was VP Singh, a former prime minister who accused Rajiv of rigging the 1989 election. Singh went on to become prime minister and vowed to bring justice to those who had been wronged by Rajiv. At this point, you might be wondering, why are we talking about all this? What does it have to do with Sri Lanka? Well, the answer is simple. All of this led to the events that transpired in Sri Lanka. Rajiv's policies towards Sri Lanka had already angered many in the Tamil community. And when he was ousted from power, they saw it as an opportunity to strike back. On October 21st, 1991, a Tamil militant group led by a man named Aryadasa Thangaraja assassinated Rajiv Gandhi. They planted a bomb on a woman named Danu, who was a member of the Tamil militant group. Danu infiltrated Rajiv's security detail, and when the right moment presented itself, she detonated the bomb, killing not only Rajiv, but also 14 others. The blast was so powerful that it left a crater 10 feet wide and 3 feet deep. When news of Rajiv's death reached Sri Lanka, the Tamil militants celebrated. They saw Rajiv as the embodiment of Indian oppression, and his death as a victory for the Tamil cause. In fact, the Tamil Eelam even released a statement praising the assassination. Meanwhile, the Indian government was in shock. They had received intelligence that Rajiv's life was in danger. But they never imagined that the attack would come from within their own country. In the aftermath, they launched a massive manhunt to find those responsible. And while they were able to arrest Danu and several other members of the Tamil militant group, the mastermind behind the assassination, Aryadasa Thangaraja, managed to escape to Sri Lanka. To this day, there is speculation about whether Aryadasa ever made it to Sri Lanka, or if he was killed in the blast. But what we do know is that the Sri Lankan government gave him asylum. In the weeks following the assassination, India demanded that Sri Lanka extradite Aryadasa, but they refused. Instead, they praised Aryadasa as a hero and invited him to attend the Sri Lankan military parade. This further strained relations between India and Sri Lanka. However, despite the assassination, India's policy towards Sri Lanka remained largely unchanged. They continued to support the Sri Lankan government in its fight against the Tamil military. In fact, India even deployed its own troops to Sri Lanka to assist the Sri Lankan military. So, in a way, Rajiv's death led to closer ties between India and Sri Lanka. But this wasn't necessarily a good thing for the Tamil community in Sri Lanka. You see, with India's help, the Sri Lankan military was able to crush the Tamil rebellion once and for all. But in doing so, they also committed some pretty horrific atrocities. Thousands of Tamil civilians were killed, and many more were forced to flee their homes. And while India did condemn these atrocities, they never took any concrete action against Sri Lanka. In hindsight, it's clear that Rajiv's assassination was a turning point in India's history. It marked the end of an era in which politicians were willing to stand up for their principles and fight for what they believed in. Instead, we got a new breed of politicians who are more interested in power than making a positive impact. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave us a like and subscribe for more great content. Thanks for watching.